With Black Saturday, we didn't get any time to prepare. Obviously, with the weather conditions that day and the fires that came together, no one was prepared for what will forever be known as Black Saturday. However, we have learnt from that day and from that disaster, and Kildonan as an agency has responded to both the Queensland and the Victorian floods, and what we've learnt is that we need to resource staff with things like laptops and mobile phones and vehicles and accommodation, and also offer them an on-call service, and then whilst they're responding to the disaster, they're offered secondary consult and then a debrief immediately when they get back from their response.
Okay, well I guess the warnings really started back at the end of November when we started with rains happening in North Queensland, and our local social workers were involved in the response to that. But as the situation worsened after New Year, or around the time of New Year, and we faced very suddenly the Toowoomba floods, and that flowed on into the Lockyer Valley and the Brisbane floods. I was actually managing a social work service response from Canberra, which is where I spend much of my time, and later moved to Brisbane and subsequently to Cairns in response to Cyclone Yasi as well. So, and at the same time we had events happening in other parts of Australia and internationally in Egypt and Christchurch. Every November, I ask our social work senior staff in the network to ensure they've got their contact details for their staff up to date. We have an emergency management and business continuity plan. So we always plan for the disaster season. So we know what that looks like. But I guess the other preparation is how our business as usual is managed, because we still have to provide a service to our clientele at the same time as we're ramping up a service to people who've been impacted by disasters. So putting those arrangements in place has been really critical, and getting some staff to come in and support me to be able to deliver the disaster response service was also a really critical part of the preparation.
Well, I personally didn't have any warning whatsoever, apart of course from what I'd heard on the news. And I knew that it was going to be an absolutely disastrous time for Queensland. But I was on leave, and I was recalled from leave totally unexpectedly to come in and help manage the disaster response. In terms of preparation for my team, in fact, I didn't have a team. The Queensland Health obviously has a disaster management plan, and that was very much in place. There were some people who'd come in a few days prior to my being called in who were looking at how to help the districts interpret the plan and to put in place extra protocols that they might have needed. But there was no team, there was just me. And the first thing I did was, in fact, have a look at the disaster management plan at that very high strategic level, and we looked at doing a little bit in terms of writing something that might be useful for the districts. So in fact I had no preparations, but of course Queensland Health did at a different level.